You know that specific adrenaline spike you get when you're just sort of flipping through the racks at a crowded thrift store?
Oh yeah, the treasure hunt feeling.
Right, exactly. And your hand brushes against this like pristine vintage designer jacket
Uh-huh.
and you check the tag and it says $5. But you just know instantly based on the stitching or, the label that it is worth hundreds, maybe
Oh,
thousands.
absolutely, but that's when the panic sets in. Yeah.
Yes. The moment you realize what you found, your survival instincts just have to kick in. Because if you gasp or like clutch it to your chest and literally sprint to the cash register,
Someone is definitely going to notice.
yeah, you might tip off the staff or another shopper might just swoop in and try to snag it from your cart. You have to maintain this absolute composure. You just have to play it cool.
I mean, you are relying entirely on an ironclad poker face to, well, preserve the information asymmetry. You know the true value, and the environment around you does not.
Right. And today, we're taking that exact thrift store adrenaline and applying it to an arena with significantly higher stakes. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
For you listening right now, our mission today is to completely unpack this really fascinating, highly tactical first-person account of a property purchase. We're exploring a source text titled, How I Found a Mobile Home, Bought It Cheap, and Turned It into an Income Property.
Yeah, and this isn't just some generic real estate guide, telling you to check your credit score and save up a down payment.
No, no, not at all.
It's a literal play-by-play diary detailing a masterclass in manufactured leverage.
It really is. The author provides this incredibly transparent look at how a retail buyer can adopt what are basically institutional level negotiation tactics.
Right, they essentially reverse engineered a scenario where the seller felt mathematically compelled to accept an offer that was drastically below the asking price.
Just to tease the end result for you before we get into the weeds. This buyer targeted a highly viewed property listed around $60,000, and they ultimately walked away paying only $40,000.
Which is what, a 33% reduction?
Yeah, massive. We are going to break down the actual mechanics of how they achieved that, and we're going to look at this transaction in distinct phases of leverage.
That's good.
So let's look at phase one, which is information asymmetry and the initial find. The author details just casually coming across a Zillow listing for a two-bedroom, two-bathroom mobile home.
Just scrolling through Zillow like we all do.
Right, exactly. And the listing price is just under $60,000. Physically, the author notes it features a shared front porch, but it actually has individual entrances for each side of the unit.
What's fascinating here is that layout completely shifts the intrinsic value of the asset.
Oh, so?
Well, to an untrained buyer, someone just scrolling through listings, a shared porch with separate doors might just look like an eccentric architectural decision. Like, oh, that's
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, quirky mobile home layout.
Exactly. But for an investor focused on cash flow optimization, or cap rates, a split two-bed, two-bath layout is essentially a duplex in disguise.
Oh, wow. I see.
Yeah, it allows for dual independent rentals under a single roof. So the buyer instantly recognized the house hacking potential here. They realized they could rent side A and side B separately, essentially doubling the revenue streams from a single acquisition.
Double the rent for the price of one unit.
Precisely.
And that takes us right back to the vintage jacket analogy. The buyer sets up a viewing appointment with their real estate agent. And during that scheduling process, the agent explicitly warns them that there are multiple other appointments lined up for this exact property.
Which means foot traffic, which means competition.
Right. So the buyer notes in their diary that they walked the property, they saw the massive multifamily yield potential with their own eyes, but they deliberately maintained a strict poker face.
Because in real estate negotiations, enthusiasm is a huge liability.
Yeah, you can't show your hand.
I mean, if the seller's agent, or honestly, even the buyer's own agent, senses this desperation driven by a property's hidden potential, the buyer's negotiating leverage just completely evaporates right there.
They'll know they have you on the hook.
Exactly. Recognizing the asset's true value gave the buyer the confidence to pursue it, but their discipline in hiding that assessment is what actually protected their capital.
Yeah. But, recognizing a good deal and keeping quiet about it doesn't actually secure the asset for you.
No, it doesn't.
Like, if the property is generating that much foot traffic from other appointments, just being stoic isn't going to win you a bidding war. You have to actually put a number on paper.
You have to engage.
Right. Which brings us to phase two, algorithmic manipulation and the initial offer.
This is the transition from passive observer to active combatant in the market.
I love that phrasing. So, okay, let's unpack this because the mechanics of this first offer really set the stage for everything that follows.
Yeah, they do.
The property is listed just under $60,000. The buyer decides to submit an all-cash offer of $49,000. But they embed this really specific mechanism in the contract, an escalation clause capping at $62,000.
Right. And to understand the strategic weight of this, we really need to look at how it functions on a contractual level and, honestly, the risk the buyer is taking by utilizing it.
Yeah, when I was reading through the author's diary, the escalation clause instantly reminded me of setting up an automated proxy bid on an auction site. Like eBay.
That's a perfect comparison, actually.
Right, because when an auction is sitting at $10, you might tell the system, hey, I'm willing to pay up to $50, but the system doesn't immediately submit a $50 bid for you.
Just bids 11.
Exactly, bids 11.
Yeah.
And if someone else swoops in and bids 12, your proxy automatically bumps you to 13. It just keeps you barely ahead of the competition up to your absolute ceiling.
It operates on the exact same principle, but with a crucial real estate twist.
Yeah.
Unlike an automated digital platform where algorithms just do the work, a real estate escalation clause requires legal proof to trigger.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, according to the author's notes, their clause stated it would increase their bid by $500 over any other bona fide offer.
Bona fide.
Right. That legal term, bona fide, means the seller cannot just claim they have a higher offer to artificially inflate the price. Like they can't just lie to drive you.
Oh, we totally just got an offer for $60,000. You better raise yours.
Exactly. They can't do that.
You can.
The seller's agent must produce a legitimate, signed, competing contract to trigger our buyer's $500 bump.
Man, that provides an incredible layer of protection. So they offered $49,000. If the market is actually quiet, they just secure the asset at $49,000.
Yes.
But if a competing buyer offers, say, $54,000, the clause demands proof of that, and then it automatically positions our buyer at $54,500. They guarantee they win the property without just blindly offering their maximum capital up front.
Right, though there is a calculated risk here.
Oh, like what?
Well, by submitting an escalation clause, you are legally showing the seller your absolute maximum budget on paper. You are flat out telling them, I will pay up to $62,000.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So if the seller is savvy, they might simply reject the whole escalation structure entirely and just issue a counteroffer for a flat $62,000 because they know the buyer has the funds.
Oh, wow. They could just call their bluff, basically.
Okay. But the buyer took that risk to neutralize the immediate competition.
And it worked. The diary notes that the escalation clause was triggered, and the seller accepted an offer from our buyer at $55,000.
Which is a solid win.
It is. Now, I do have to point out a slight numerical quirk in the source text right here.
The math gets a little weird.
Yeah, the author writes in their diary, verbatim, seller took my offer at $55K. I said $48K. How did I go from 48 to 55? That's an $8K increase.
Yeah, the author's diary notes get a bit hazy on the exact math in that specific entry.
Right, because going from 48 to 55 is a $7,000 jump, not $8,000.
Right.
And earlier in the exact same entry, they noted their initial baseline offer was $49,000 anyway, so who knows? But the slightly scrambled arithmetic doesn't diminish the reality of the outcome. The underlying strategy remained completely intact.
Oh, absolutely. The execution was effective regardless of the diary's notation errors. I mean, an accepted offer at $55,000 proves the escalation clause performed its intended function perfectly.
Yeah, it did its job.
The seller clearly received another legitimate offer, likely around $54,500, and the author's clause automatically vaulted them over that competitor by $500, securing the contract.
Okay, so the buyer has officially won the initial bid. They are under contract at $55,000.
But we aren't at the end of the story.
No. Because as we established at the beginning of this deep dive, the final acquisition price was $40,000. We still have this massive $15,000 gap to cover.
A huge gap.
So how does a buyer orchestrate a price drop of that magnitude after the seller has already accepted the offer?
Right, and this transitions us to phase 3, which I like to call the psychological squeeze.
Okay.
And it revolves entirely around one specific contract contingency.
The inspection period.
Yes.
The inspection period.
So the buyer reveals their next specific addendum to the contract, a 3-day inspection period. Now, I have to challenge the logic of this move, just initially.
Sure.
Because a 3-day inspection window sounds like a massive tactical liability to me.
Yeah.
Like usually a buyer wants 10 to 14 days.
Right. You need time.
Yeah. If you only give yourself 72 hours and you can't get a plumber, a roofer, and an electrician out to the property in time, you forfeit your right to object.
You're stuck.
Your earnest money, the deposit you put down to secure the contract, becomes non-refundable. You are totally locked in. So why on earth would they intentionally condense their own window?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of the buyer's specific capabilities, the whole risk profile changes.
You are absolutely right that for a standard retail buyer relying on third-party contractors, 3 days is a complete trap. But the author explicitly notes their intention was to conduct the walkthrough themselves. They didn't need to coordinate schedules with external professionals. So they condensed the timeline to make the offer highly appealing to the seller. Because to a seller, a 3-day inspection looks like a fast, guaranteed close. Like, oh, they're barely even checking.
Right. It looks very low friction.
Exactly. But for the buyer, it served a completely different strategic purpose.
Yeah.
It was all about market manipulation.
Explain how that manipulation actually functions practically.
Okay, so by securing an accepted offer with any inspection period, no matter how short it is, the property's status on local listing services and platforms like Zillow immediately changes.
It changes to pending, right?
Yes, pending or under contract.
Oh. It's the equivalent of putting highly sought-after concert tickets into your digital checkout cart.
That's a great way to look at it.
Because the second you click Add to Cart, a timer pops up giving you like 10 minutes to complete the transaction. And during that exact window, those tickets are entirely removed from the global inventory.
Yes.
No one else can buy them while you just sit there and debate whether you actually want to finalize the purchase. You have effectively iced the market.
That is precisely the dynamic just applied to the housing market. I mean, momentum is literally the most valuable currency a seller has.
Right.
When a property first hits the market, it receives an algorithmic bump. It gets flagged as a new listing, pushed to the top of search results. It generates a flurry of showings.
Everyone gets the email alert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But by locking the property into a pending status, the buyer halts all of that momentum instantly. The listing goes dark. The seller's agent has to actually call all those other interested parties and tell them the property is spoken for.
Wow, man. And the execution detailed in the diary here is incredibly methodical. With the property safely pulled from the active market, the buyer arrives for their inspection with a notebook.
Just a simple notebook.
Yeah, and they proceed to document every conceivable flaw. I mean, every scratched cabinet, every aging seal, every squeaky floorboard.
Everything.
But they don't immediately send a demanding email. They hold their cards. Day 1 passes, day 2 passes. They wait until the very last possible moment, the 3rd day of the contractual window, to initiate their leverage.
It is a totally calculated exercise in psychological pressure.
It really is.
Because over those 72 hours, the seller is relaxing into the transaction. They're exhaling. They are mentally allocating that $55,000.
They're already spending it in their head.
Exactly. They've likely turned away backup offers. They believe the finish line has been crossed.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the final squeeze. And here's where it gets really interesting. The buyer takes their meticulous notebook of flaws and creates this official findings report. But they don't just ask for a vague discount like, hey, knock a few grand off.
No, that would be too weak.
They generate a line-by-line estimate of what a licensed professional contractor would charge to rectify every single issue they found. And the total sum of that professional estimate comes out to roughly $15,000.
But, and this is key, the diary notes a massive layer of information asymmetry right here.
Yes, because the buyer is handy. They have zero intention of actually hiring professional contractors.
None at all.
They plan to execute the repairs entirely themselves, and they estimate their actual out-of-pocket material costs will only be around $2,000.
So the buyer is weaponizing a $13,000 delta.
It's wild.
They are presenting the seller with a catastrophic $15,000 problem, while secretly holding a $2,000 solution in their back pocket.
So on that final 3rd day, the buyer formally submits a notice of defect or, a request for repairs accompanied by this daunting $15,000 professional estimate. And they deliver a very clear ultimatum.
They basically say take it or leave it.
Yeah, they inform the seller that due to the extensive required repairs, the $55,000 contract is no longer viable. Their new firm offer is $40,000.
And we really have to examine the profound contractual corner the seller has been maneuvered into at this exact moment.
Right.
If the seller rejects this sudden $40,000 ultimatum,
Uh-huh.
the contract cancels. The buyer gets their earnest money back free and clear because they objected within that legal 3-day window.
But what happens to the seller?
Well, they have to put the property back on the market.
Exactly. But it doesn't return as a fresh, exciting new listing.
No, it doesn't.
It returns with the dreaded back-on-market status.
Which acts like a neon warning sign to every other buyer in the ecosystem.
Oh, totally. Because the immediate assumption from anyone looking is that the previous buyer discovered some massive structural flaw during their inspection, like black mold or a cracked foundation.
The property becomes fundamentally stigmatized.
Stigmatized asset.
Yeah. The seller is staring down the barrel of relisting a tainted asset, likely having to legally disclose the very flaws the buyer just documented, and starting that entire momentum-building process from scratch.
It's a nightmare for the seller.
And the author explicitly understood this leverage, noting in their diary, quote, "If they didn't take it, no harm or foul, we would just walk away."
And that is the crux of the entire operation, isn't it?
It is.
True negotiation leverage doesn't come from aggressive posturing or, like, bluffing. It comes from a mathematical detachment from the outcome.
Exactly.
The buyer was not emotionally invested in owning this specific home. They were invested in the spread between the purchase price and the passive income potential. If the math ceased to work at $40,000, they were fully prepared to just walk away and find another asset.
And that genuine willingness to walk away is what transforms a simple repair request into a highly effective ultimatum.
So what was the outcome of this calculated squeeze? Against what might seem like common sense initially, the seller capitulated.
They caved.
Faced with the reality of a stigmatized relisting and a totally collapsed deal, they accepted the $40,000 revision. The diary author concludes this entry with a rather understated summary, just saying, "Man, what a deal."
I mean, it is a stark demonstration of how contractual mechanisms can be utilized to systematically dismantle a seller's leverage.
It really is. Let's look at the arc we have just traced here.
Okay.
The buyer identified a $60,000 Zillow listing with hidden multifamily potential. They protected their assessment with strict composure during the walkthrough.
The poker face.
Right. Then they utilized an automated escalation clause to secure the contract without overcommitting their capital up front.
Yeah.
Then they leveraged a rapid inspection period to halt market momentum and isolate the seller. And finally, they utilized the asymmetry of a professional repair quote versus their own DIY reality to force a $15,000 concession.
All backed by the ultimate power of simply walking away.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, the next time you engage with the real estate market?
I think the most critical takeaway here is a paradigm shift regarding listed prices. A price on a real estate platform like Zillow or Redfin is not a static retail tag. It is simply the opening parameter of a highly fluid negotiation.
Right, it's just the opening bid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every contingency in a contract, whether it is an escalation cap, a financing clause, or even a highly condensed inspection window, is a strategic lever you can pull.
It completely reframes the whole process. You aren't just shopping for a floor plan and a nice kitchen. You are navigating a complex sequence of risk and leverage.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
And, it leaves us with an important, broader market dynamic to consider today.
What's that?
Well, what we have just analyzed is an individual retail buyer successfully deploying aggressive, highly orchestrated negotiation tactics to squeeze a seller on a standard starter property.
Yeah, a mobile home.
Right.
Right.
And these are maneuvers traditionally associated with institutional investors or commercial acquisitions, not everyday people.
Sure.
So if individual buyers are increasingly mastering and deploying these contractual weapons, using inspection periods as market timeouts and repair quotes as hard ultimatums, what happens to the everyday housing market?
Oh, that's a good point.
Does the simple act of selling a family home begin to require the defensive posturing of a corporate legal team? Does it turn everyday home selling into a hostile corporate takeover?
Man, that is a phenomenal question to ponder. The line between a savvy individual investment and a hostile corporate takeover might be thinner than we think.
It really might be.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these concepts, analyze the market mechanics around you with a sharper lens, and as always, keep digging into your own sources. We'll catch you next time.